next episode of the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series, Wisdom. That's not their point, but that's what I'm using. I'm using it as sort of a template to talk about coaching concepts, leadership ideas, wisdom, right? How to be more wise, or what creates more wisdom. Actually, it's more through the coaching leadership lens that I usually speak through these, but they also help us kind of figure out, man, that might help me be a better person, live a better life, have less anxiety, be able to, create more what I really want in my life. Okay, so episode 14 is what we're on, and so this one is, when surrounded by war, one must eventually choose a side. Okay, this one, my initial thought is this. Not too deep, pretty self-explanatory in some ways, but I think it does point to something that I don't normally talk about, which is personality styles. Okay, I'll get to that in a little bit. For right now, let me talk about the surrounded by war. Now, okay, we're talking about Star Wars, and the animated series is the Clone Wars, so they're in the middle of a war, so obviously they're talking about that. And so, I don't know what the episode was, it doesn't matter, but these are usually trying to connect to something in the episode that it was, there's something in there that you're supposed to learn from it, whatever. So, this one, right, so when surrounded by war, so it's kind of hinting that idea of like, well, I'm just going to stay out of it. I'm going to stay out of the battle. I'm going to stay out of the upset. I'm going to stay out of the conversation so that I don't get hurt. Right? So that's one way to view that is and so what they're saying is, like, when you're surrounded by it, when there's nothing else but war around you, eventually you have to choose a side, because it's going to get so what's the word? You're going to be encased by it, right? That you cannot not take a side. You're going to be forced to at some point. In a war situation, like literal war situation, by gunpoint, you're going to be forced to take a side, either under pretense or not. You're just going to have to take a side. Okay, I'm not going to. All right, well, that aside, let's talk about it from just a normal day-to-day thing from a, say, leadership standpoint. So when there's conflict between people, there's a place for mediation, and then there's a place for figuring out what the best solution is, which they go hand in hand. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to separate those two. I'm just saying there's a place for you as the leader to not take a side, find out the facts, right? Find out what actually happened, and figure out why it's so emotionally charged, if it is. Usually it is. When there's conflict, there's emotion involved. So finding out not just the facts, but like, why did that upset this side? Why is that upsetting to this side? What is going on? What's causing the conflict? And is it emotional, or is it actual a thing that happened that was out of their control, but it turned into emotional because of where they are? Okay. Excuse me. So you got to somewhat separate those two as a leader to be effective, in my opinion. You cannot just hear one side and say, well, they must be right. But you can do that, right? You can do whatever you want, right? I think as a leader, from a wisdom standpoint, is to take in all information first, right? And then hear the reasoning of why this person did what they did, why the other person did what they did, and then look at it from, okay, now I understand how it happened, why you see it that way, why you see it that way. Then it becomes kind of mediation, right? Or it can come down to helping them understand what the other side is seeing and why they're so different. And that's why I bring up personality styles. It wasn't my first thought about it, but that's when you're doing that kind of leadership, when you're in that position of trying to mediate or resolve a conflict between people, having them understand that the way they see it isn't always the way other people see it can go a very, very long way in diffusing emotional charge in a situation. That yes, you see it as they're completely wrong and how stupid can they be and blah, blah. Well, they see it very differently because of their personality. That's one factor. It's not the only thing, but it's very helpful. Been very helpful to me personally, for sure. So having people understand personality styles, right, can go a very long way on that. And I'm not going to go heavy into that. I tend to start with the social styles that the Greeks, of the Greek era, ancient Greece came up with. There's 4 main social styles. I talk about them in modern terms, but I use those because they're still apt. It's still very normal to see that humans still are that way. It hasn't changed over those number of thousands of years. So I think there's a lot of truth in them, and there's some wisdom in using truth. So what my first thought, when I first read this in my head, when surrounded by war, one must eventually choose a side. So there's a personality style I would call the peacemaker. Okay, some people call it other things. I call it the peacemaker. And this is a person who avoids conflict, actually goes out of their way to make sure they don't offend. They shy away from conflict. When there is conflict, they will pull away from the situation as far as they can until they're drawn into it. All right? So my first thought was, when you're surrounded by war, you can't withdraw. You can't pull away from it. You're surrounded, meaning there is no escape from it. You eventually have to choose. And that's what peacemakers will do eventually. They will take a side when forced. They have to, right? But they're going to be the one personality style, the 4, that's going to probably take the longest to do that. Probably. Not always. But they're going to be one of the last ones because they just do not like conflict. It's very difficult for them. It's for some very physically painful to have conflict happen. And so they will acquiesce. They will say whatever they need to say to diffuse a situation. That can be good in a lot of cases, but it also can cause problems because you have to be authentic, right? You have to make sure that you are not glossing over things. You got to deal with the problem. Okay, which sounds more like another personality style. It's more my personality style. All right. So that's kind of the cursory thing I thought. But here's the other one is when you're in the middle of that, going back to my situation, right? You're trying to resolve things. You're trying to help people see where other people are coming from. That's helping them. It's not choosing a side. You're choosing a different. You're not choosing one of their sides. That's where I'm trying to get to. So I'll just get to what I'm trying to say. You're not choosing one of theirs. Say there's 2 people, conflict. You're trying to help mediate. Do the whole mediate conflict resolution thing. You're not choosing a side of one of A or B. You're actually choosing a third side, right? A different way to see the situation. You're choosing to be on the side of reconciliation and seeing a path, helping them understand. There is a way to understand where this person sees it, and then it's not wrong, it's the way they see it, and then they see it another way, and then what's the common goal here? So what you're doing is taking a side of the path to, getting it resolved. That's a side. It's not one side or the other. It's not taking someone's side. It's a different side, right? It's not like a coin. There's one or the other, right? There's usually at least 2 stories to every situation. Usually, right? You could say there's always 3. So this is an interesting way to look at it, which I think is semi-powerful. So I'm glad it popped in my head. There's this person's truth about what happened and how it should be. There's this person's truth about what happened and how it should be. And then there's the capital T truth about what actually happened and what is needed for the project to be completed, whatever the thing is. There's the truth of what actually happened, and then there's the interpretations. So there's actually 3 sides to every story, because we are, as human beings, full of interpretation all the time. Some philosophers have even said that is the world. It's a perceptual illusion. That is the world. It's all perception. Now, I believe with that, there's also truth that does not, it stands separate from consensus, agreement. There is truth, capital T. And then there's people's lowercase t truths about what they think about it. And it's true for them. That's what they see. And because of their personality, they see it a certain way. I get that. This person sees it this way. Doesn't mean they're either one's right or wrong. It's the way they see it. It is true for them, but it's not necessarily the truth. So the side that you want to, as a leader, if at all possible, without it becoming a weapon, because that's not the point, is to find the truth. What is the capital T truth in the matter? Take that side. And so when you're trying to figure that out, and then you can see how this is related. Can you see how they saw it that way? Great. Can you see how they saw it this way? See how it was, we both kind of like, whoops, we sort of missed the mark on both sides. How do we get closer to the truth, capital T? And if we can do that, maybe there isn't as much conflict as possible, or as we thought. We can minimize it, right? There still might be, I just don't like the way you do. Okay, there's personality differences. One person goes about it a certain way and doesn't, another person doesn't like it that they do that. You're not going to necessarily resolve that because people are who they are. You can shave off those rough edges, right, of doing it a certain way that could be just a slight bit different. You don't have to necessarily change your whole personality. Just do something a little bit differently, and then it won't cause harm. Okay, great. Then let's work on that. Okay. Anyway, that's a too specific thing for what I'm saying. So back to the point, right? When you're surrounded by war, you have to choose a side. Well, it's not I think where I'm landing here is it's not always one or the other side. There may be multiple factions. There may be 8 people in the room that tend to look like they all disagree. But there's also the truth. So there's always that one more side, that there's the truth somewhere in there. And it exists. And so I say, as a leader, being committed to finding what the truth is without blaming or taking sides of someone else to get there, but you're just committed to finding that, can help to alleviate a lot of the ongoing issues between people. And then we can start to deal with why personalities perceive that truth differently. And then how can we relate to each other so that we don't get bogged down in personality differences or viewpoint differences, but we can all kind of look at it like, okay, that is the truth, got it. I was put off by the way you looked at it, sorry, or whatever, right? Okay, so that's my take on it. So different than when I first read this, where I landed was different. So it's interesting in this conversation. All right, hope that was helpful. And again, when surrounded by war, one must eventually choose a side. I think that is true. And I think leaders, it's not an eventually thing. I think it's hey, let's get to what's the core issue, and then how are we relating to it, and can you see that neither side is right or wrong, they're just different, and then how can we get closer to the truth. I think going there as a general thought of being a leader, pretty smart, right? That gets kind of through all the personality issues, kind of cuts to the main thing as fast as you can. And then being aware that you have your own personality too, right? So the way you approach it, you have to be careful about that too. So being aware of all the personality styles and how that all works can be very, very, very helpful in alleviating conflict. There you go. Again, hope that was helpful, and I will see you next time. Take care.